And may I start by congratulating my honourable friend, the member for Warwick and Leamington, for securing this important debate. He said headwinds are strong and many for the automotive sector, and he then went on to point out 16 issues, including business rates, energy costs, the move from older energies to renewables, the UK future trade and relationship beyond withdrawal from the EU, a freeze on recruitment, leaving of the customs union, huge uncertainty to businesses with lack of certainty over the government's position on a future customs union, the potential shift of manufacturing to EU countries, what kind of regulatory framework will exist beyond the EU, and added barriers to trade, the potential loss of tariff-free access and what would happen if we return to World Trade Organization tariffs, rules of origin changes, and then members set out many, many more concerns, the impact on SMEs, 90% of the supply chain, complex and EU-wide, and I think this is a crucial point, the complex and EU-wide web of production, the multiple border crossings just for the production of one single car, and then on to Dieselgate. So, the punitive measures currently on some of the cleanest diesel cars, and crucially, the lack of confidence for the car industry and the uncertainty in the government's position. He also talked about the economic bellwether that the automotive industry represents, so crucial for the West Midlands and his constituency. The honourable member talked about the transformative effect in Coventry that the automotive industry has had in her constituency. The honourable member for Vauxhall talked about the loss of almost half of jobs in Ellesmere Port and Neston, and he repeatedly speaks up for his constituency. I think it was poignant when the honourable member for Birmingham Erdington talked so eloquently and expressed that a job for Warren was so much more than work, and we know that for in every industry work is so much more. It's the lifeblood of a community. It has been said many, many times that the automotive industry is one of the UK's most successful sectors. It provides employment to over 150,000 people across the UK and contributed to 15.2 billion to the economy. There is no doubt that the continued success of the automotive sector is vital for workers and families across the UK and for the success of our economy as a whole. But worryingly, it has been going through a challenging time. And although, there was an uplift in April, car sales have plummeted in March by 15.7% compared with the last year, and almost 2,000 jobs have been announced. Job losses have been announced over the last 6 months. In January, despite all of the assurances from the government when PSA took over, Vauxhall announced 250 job losses on top of the already 400 lost last year at their plant in Ellesmere Port, as was described by the honourable member. And I would like to pay tribute to the honourable member and Unite the Union for all the work they did with the PSA group to protect as many jobs, future jobs, as possible. In April, it was announced at Nissan that they would be cutting jobs in Sunderland. And last month in Jaguar, the UK's biggest car manufacturer, which employs 40,000 people, announced it would be shredding 1,000 temporary workers' contracts in the West Midlands. The three reasons that they listed for these cuts were low demand, with sales at Jaguar down 26%, changes on tax on diesel cars, and the uncertainty caused by Brexit. Now, these three factors are all things which are either wholly or partly in the government's control. The uncertainty over Brexit is something the government has complete control over, or at least they would have if they could sort the cabinet out and if it wasn't in so much chaos. The confusion over taxation policy on diesel is again something that the government has control over and has in recent months actually exacerbated. And weak demand, as we know in the economy, could be mitigated by government policy through, for example, encouraging wage growth and government spending to increase national income. As has been said, the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders has highlighted just how important it is trade with the EU is to the automotive sector. they have said, and it has been mentioned, that 1,100 trucks from the EU deliver components worth 35 million to the UK car engine plant every single day. It's these complex cross-border supply chains that depend crucially on free and frictionless movement of goods and manufacturers are very concerned about that freedom and that frictionless borders being disrupted. Yeah.
Does she agree with me that it's been 1 year, 10 months and 30 days since the UK voted to leave the European Union? Does she agree that in that time the government has had more than enough time to have sorted its negotiating position on the customs union, considering how important it is?
That's right. I outlined previously that perhaps some of that confusion, some of the slowness in the process essentially is because an initial set of negotiations has to be carried out with 2 or 3 cabinet members before negotiations with the EU can take place. The SMMT has said neither options currently being considered by the government would provide the frictionless movement of goods that the automotive industry needs to maintain its competitiveness and productivity. I think it's right that my party have called for the government to negotiate a new comprehensive EU-UK customs union covering all goods. This is the best way to ensure that there are no tariffs or customs checks within Europe to support jobs, particularly the 2.1 million UK manufacturing jobs, and to help avoid, of course, crucially, the need for a hard border in Northern Ireland. It would be very, very helpful if the Minister could use his closing remarks to set out how the government will ensure the future security of the industry and those employed with it beyond, those bespoke assurances to the likes of Nissan and Peugeot, which were important, but we need more than that. To conclude, Chair, the automotive industry in the UK is a great success story. I think it was a tour de force set out by all members in this room in defence of the industry, but it's currently under huge pressure, and sadly this shows through in increasingly frequent announcements of job losses and sales figures. It is absolutely incumbent on this government to work with businesses, industry bodies and trade unions and listen to them when they express very clearly that they should prioritise a customs arrangement which removes the risk of tariffs being imposed. We must, as an imperative, seek to protect workers and jobs and secure the future success of the industry as a whole. And I would be grateful if the Minister now could set out how he intends to do this in his remarks.